Today we're getting juicy and tackling a fruit that's probably pretty familiar to all of us, the grapefruit.
Grapefruit.
I know what you're thinking, grapefruit. That's just a breakfast staple, right? But trust me, there's so much more to this fruit than meets the eye.
Yeah, it's a fruit with a really fascinating history and maybe even a little bit mysterious, wouldn't you say?
Well, let's peel back the layers then and start right at the beginning. Where did grapefruit even come from?
All right, so picture this. You're in 18th century Barbados,
Okay.
and this new fruit pops up. It's a hybrid, a mix of the sweet orange and the pomelo. And get this, it's called the forbidden fruit.
Forbidden fruit. Wow, that's way more exciting than I thought grapefruit could be. Why was it called that?
You know, that's actually a bit of a mystery. It was first mentioned, though, way back in 1750 by a guy named Griffith Hughes in his book, The Natural History of Barbados.
So from forbidden fruit to the grapefruit we all know and maybe love today, how did that happen?
The name grapefruit came a bit later, and it probably has to do with how the fruits grow. They cluster on the tree, kind of like bunches of grapes.
Oh, that makes sense. Now, when I think of grapefruit, I picture white grapefruit, but also those beautiful pink and red varieties. What's the story behind those different types?
Yeah, so the classic white grapefruit, that's your baseline. But then things get really interesting with the ruby red. This one popped up in the 1920s because of a natural mutation on a pink grapefruit tree.
So it was like a happy little accident?
Yeah, exactly. People loved it. The vibrant red color, that sweeter taste, it was a hit. And then scientists got involved and used radiation to create even redder varieties like the Rio Red and the Star Ruby.
Hold on, radiation. That's not what I expected to hear.
It sounds wild, right? But it's true. And the Star Ruby, well, that one's the most difficult to grow. Think of it as the diva of the grapefruit world. It's got the deepest red color, but it's super picky.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so we've got the history and some of the varieties down. Let's talk nutrition now. Is grapefruit really as healthy as people say?
Well, it's a great source of vitamin C. One serving gives you about 37% of your daily recommended intake. But I wouldn't call it a nutritional powerhouse.
So not quite a superfood, but still a good healthy option.
Exactly. It's mostly water, about 90%, with some carbs and very little protein or fat. Think of it as a tasty way to hydrate and get that vitamin C boost.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's got to be more to grapefruit than just the vitamin C, right?
Oh, there definitely is. For one, it's got this unique compound called grapefruit mercaptan. That's actually a big part of what makes grapefruit smell so distinct, so different from other citrus. And get this, it even interacts with our taste buds to make both sweet and bitter flavors stronger.
Wow, grapefruit mercaptan. That's a word I won't forget.
It's quite a mouthful, but it's super important for creating that complex flavor profile that we associate with grapefruit. And of course, we can't forget about the tartness that comes from citric acid. Grapefruit actually has about half the citric acid that lemon juice does.
So it's pretty sour, but in a good way, of course.
Yeah, that tangy flavor is really refreshing. And you know, it's also what makes grapefruit such a versatile ingredient in the kitchen.
Oh, I'm intrigued. I'm ready to move beyond just grapefruit for breakfast.
Well, grapefruit's tartness and tanginess make it a surprisingly versatile ingredient.
I'm all ears. What kind of dishes can we use it in?
Oh, all sorts. It works in both sweet and savory dishes.
Interesting. Let's start with sweet. What goes well with grapefruit?
Well, grapefruit and avocado are a classic combination. That creamy avocado with the bright acidity of grapefruit. It's a perfect pairing. You see it a lot in salads, but you can also use them together in desserts and smoothies.
That sounds delicious.
Oh.
What about savory applications?
Grapefruit is great for balancing out richer flavors. In seafood dishes, for example, it works wonders. Think about grilled salmon with a grapefruit salsa, or maybe scallops with a grapefruit vinaigrette. The citrus just cuts through all that richness, makes for a really refreshing taste.
I can definitely see that. Are there any cuisines that really embrace grapefruit as an ingredient?
Yeah, some Asian cuisines use grapefruit quite a bit. It adds a tangy element to stir fries and marinades. Grapefruit juice can also brighten up sauces and dressings. It's like a secret weapon for adding complexity and depth.
So salads, seafood, Asian cuisine. What else? What about drinks?
Oh, of course. Cocktails. You can't forget about the Paloma, that classic tequila cocktail. Grapefruit soda is key in that one. Gives it a refreshing citrus kick that goes perfectly with the tequila and lime.
It sounds like grapefruit really is a versatile ingredient. But you mentioned something earlier that I want to go back to, the way grapefruit can interact with medications. That seems pretty important to talk about.
It's definitely something to be aware of. We tend to think of grapefruit as just food, but it actually has compounds that can seriously affect how our bodies deal with certain drugs. It all comes down to these things called furanocoumarins, specifically one called bergamottin.
Furanocoumarins. That doesn't sound very friendly. What do they do?
Well, they can interfere with a really important enzyme in our liver called CYP3A4. This enzyme is responsible for breaking down something like half of the medications people take. So when grapefruit juice inhibits CYP3A4, those drugs can build up in the bloodstream. And that can lead to some pretty bad side effects, maybe even an overdose in some cases.
So you're saying even one grapefruit can mess with medication levels?
It can, yeah. And it's not just prescription drugs either. Over-the-counter medications, herbal supplements, even some recreational drugs can be affected.
Wow, okay. That's a little scary.
Yeah.
So how does this interaction actually work? Does the grapefruit, block the medication from being absorbed?
It actually happens in two ways. So first, like we said, those furanocoumarins, they inhibit that CYP3A4 enzyme in the liver. That means the drug isn't broken down and removed from the body as quickly, so levels in the bloodstream go up.
Okay, that's one way. What's the second?
The second way is that grapefruit compounds can also interfere with how drugs are absorbed in the intestines. They affect the transporter proteins that move the drugs from your gut into the bloodstream, so less of the drug actually gets absorbed, which makes it less effective.
So it's a double whammy, increased levels in some cases and decreased absorption in others. That's serious. What should people do if they're worried about these grapefruit interactions?
The best thing is to always check those labels and package inserts for your medications. They'll usually have warnings about grapefruit if it's an issue. And when in doubt, just talk to your doctor or pharmacist. They can give you personalized advice based on what medications you're taking and your overall health.
That's really good advice. It sounds like we should enjoy grapefruit, but also be cautious.
Yeah, I wouldn't say avoid it completely, but it's really important to be informed and make smart choices. And remember, how severe these interactions are can vary quite a bit. It depends on the specific drug, how much grapefruit you're consuming, and even individual factors like genetics and overall health.
This has been really eye-opening. I never thought of grapefruit as being so complex. It's a good reminder that even something as simple as a piece of fruit can have a powerful impact on our bodies.
Absolutely. It just goes to show how important it is to pay attention to potential food-drug interactions, especially with something as common as grapefruit.
Before we move on, I'm curious about grapefruit production around the world. Who are the major grapefruit producers?
Well, when it comes to grapefruit, China is definitely the leader. They produce over half of the world's grapefruit.
Wow, over half. Who else is up there?
Vietnam comes in second, then Mexico, South Africa, and the United States.
So it's a truly global fruit. Are there any big challenges or threats to grapefruit production?
Like with most crops, pests and diseases are a constant concern. Fruit flies, for example, can cause a lot of damage to the fruit and make it more vulnerable to other pathogens.
What are diseases? Are there any major ones that affect grapefruit trees?
There are actually quite a few serious diseases that can be a problem. There's citrus tristeza virus, or CTV for short. It's a viral disease that's spread by aphids and can stunt the growth of trees and sometimes even kill them. Citrus canker is another one. It's bacterial and causes lesions on the fruit, which really affects its quality. And then probably the worst one is citrus greening disease, or HLB. It basically messes with the tree's vascular system, and you end up with misshapen, bitter fruit, and eventually the tree dies.
Those sound pretty devastating. What are people doing to fight back against these threats?
Researchers and growers are always working on new strategies to manage these pests and diseases. They're using integrated pest management techniques, which basically means combining a bunch of different approaches like biological control, cultural practices, and pesticides when absolutely necessary. Plus, there are breeding programs that are focused on developing grapefruit varieties that are resistant to these diseases.
So it's a constant battle to stay ahead of the curve.